Years ago, I worked as a personal trainer here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I worked at a couple of local gyms, and then I also owned a small gym for a period of time. I remember I had one particular client. She was in her early 80s. She had a lot of different joint issues, rather frail, and she was also a cancer survivor. She'd been through quite a bit. And we were walking toward a certain machine I was going to have her get on. And on our way there, she looked over at a glute kickback machine, a plate loaded one. And she said to me, "Do you think that would help me grow my glutes? My butt is really flat and it bothers me." And I remember being a little bit amused and surprised, thinking, wow, you're in your early 80s and you're still concerned about this. But then I backed up and thought, really, women at any age should feel free to want to look their best, improve their bodies. And if they want to grow their glutes in their 80s, by all means, let's do it. But there's more important reasons for developing that part of the body than simply aesthetics. Yes, we want to look good. We want to look good in shorts or a bathing suit. We want to fit into our clothes. We want the body fat gone from our midsection. I'm the same way. I talk a lot about longevity, and that is my primary focus right now with my training and my lifestyle. However, I do still work out for aesthetics, meaning having everything in balance, everything in proportion. So basically, not having my upper body way smaller than my lower body, or not having one side more developed than the other, and really having that symmetry. So in bodybuilding, that was one of the first things that I learned, the importance of symmetry. It didn't always matter how big you were. Yes, you needed to be big enough and have enough muscle. And when I say big, it was mostly in terms of just having enough muscle. But the judges were always looking at symmetry. Was your body a little bit smaller on the top to the bottom, or vice versa? And was one part way more developed than the others? With that being said, glutes were always a really important part of this. But as I said, there's a different reason for wanting to develop this body part. You may have heard that many people who suffer with lower back pain also have very weak glutes. So I'm going to break down to you what this muscle group does, why you should care, and how to safely train regardless of age. Because it is something, it is much easier to train hard for this body part to grow when you're younger, when you're injury free. Once you get to 61, chances are there's some injuries, age is a concern, joints, not doing anything that will harm the joints is a concern. So we're going to go into all of it. So it's really been about the last 10 years that I've noticed that women are very focused, and even the men are starting to be focused. Used to be when I would go into the gym, I would only see the women focused on working the glutes, and now I'll see the men doing the glute hip thrust and the kickback and all of the things to develop this area. So our glutes are really responsible for how we move, locomotion, and power. Those are going to be the two main roles. And then if you do any type of sport or athletic endeavor, they can really make a difference in your performance, regardless of what that sport is. I mean, it could be anything from tennis to hiking, just anything where you need some sort of power in order to have performance in that sport. So let's talk about the parts and then the development. So first of all, we have the gluteus maximus, and that is the largest section of your glutes. And when you're training, that is going to be the part of the glutes that is more frequently targeted with the exercises. Then there's the gluteus medius and the gluteus minimus. So let's look at some of the things that each part of the glutes do. So the maximus is responsible for extension and externally rotating the thigh, and it acts when force and power is needed. So if you're a sprinter, that is going to be an important muscle group. Once again, you're chasing a ball in tennis, that's going to be an important muscle group. It's very active when we're rising from a sitting position, straightening from a bending position, walking upstairs or hiking up a hill, running. It also acts on the pelvis. And now this is very important. It supports the pelvis and the trunk, which is vital for our balance and standing on one leg. So kind of an important fact that I shared with you there. The medius is really a stabilizer, a main pelvic stabilizer, and it plays a significant role in controlling the transverse and frontal plane of the motion. So basically, the front plane of motion in front of you and then side to side, and the motion that comes from the hips. The gluteus minimus is predominantly acting as a stabilizer as well, and an abductor of the hip. So when I say abduction, I mean that you're moving your leg outwards. Like a hip abduction machine is working the outer thigh. You're moving the legs out and in. So it's rotating outward. So we can actually get lower back pain when these muscles are not properly developed. Because what happens is, obviously, I've been reading off to you several things that the glutes are responsible for, but you get the idea. Stabilization of the pelvis and that power component and how we move through our hips is very much linked to the strength in our glutes. So if they're very weak, which is a common problem in our modern day society that I'll talk about in a moment, what happens is you tend to take all of your motion activities through the lower back. And over time, this can cause some problems, particularly with the discs in the back. And if you are lifting weights and you're not activating the glutes on certain exercises, such as a squat, then you are naturally going to take that lift through your lower back. This happened to me years ago when I had my first back injury, and I was a really lifted quite frequently. So I was a frequent uh, bodybuilder, lifter at the gym. I knew all of the exercises. I trained others, and I felt I was doing all of the exercises properly. But what happened was I began to take a lot of the lifting, especially of lower body exercises or even like an overhead shoulder press. I was taking it through my lower back. I really wasn't engaging my glutes. And the problem was not that I wasn't doing the proper exercises. The problem was I wasn't making a connection. And that's very important. This is a muscle group that if you don't make that connection and really feel it working and know that the glutes are firing up, chances are you might be taking things through the front of your leg, your quadriceps, or through your lower back, which was what I was doing. I was just basically powering these moves through my lower back. When I went back to training and slowly began to get better, I really focused on training the gluteus maximus, minimus, medius, all of it, really broke down the exercises that was going to target each part of the glutes. And over time, I've just really honed in on this training, and it's an important part of my lower body days. And I do train them frequently because I was slow to learn how to fire them up and I was slow with the growth. So why is this so slow to grow? Well, obviously genetics play a role in this, and some individuals just genetically, they're going to have a booty. That's it. But for most of us, when we're sitting all day, we are disengaged. We're kind of disconnected from the role of the glutes. We kind of plunk down in front of our computer or the TV or our phone, sitting down, watching a YouTube video, and they're not being engaged. So then when we stand up and we go to walk or climb stairs, we're really not using them at all because they are not properly developed. So this, I believe, is important regardless of age, and I believe it's important for both male and females. So we're also going to talk about some of the exercises that target, and this is where I want to address the concerns that I see women having. So in order to grow the glutes, you need the right number of sets and reps. This is called volume, how much you're actually doing. And you need to be using proper load. You have to have enough load, enough weight or resistance if you're using bands or some other form, such as kettlebells. You have to have enough resistance in order to have that muscle stimulation. If you don't get that muscle stimulation, it's simply not going to respond at all. So something that I am really fond of is using a couple of band exercises at the front of my workout on my lower body day where I'm working legs and glutes and calves, and really just activating and getting those muscles to wake up. And it's a good warm up as well before I start the true resistance training. So I use, they call them booty bands, glute loops. There's all kind of names for them. Brett Contreras has some great ones, really good quality, but you can go on Amazon and pretty much find these inexpensively. Just throw them in your gym bag, or you can do this at home and start to learn some of the exercises. You can do a glute bridge with the band just above the knees to stimulate with no weight, just the resistance of the band, and really make that connection. You can do some band walks, ones where you're more upright, and then ones where you're bent knee and really leaning into it. You can do kickbacks, just some things to stimulate. Where women go wrong is they tend to overdo this part and then they're fatigued by the time they get to the actual work. So make sure that it is something that you're doing 2, maybe 3 sets of. It's not something you're spending a long time on, but you're just getting that activation going and maybe just choosing a couple of exercises, not doing all of the band exercises at once, which would definitely fatigue you. Then you want to have some good compound movements. And from my training as a personal trainer, coach, and years in the field, and also preparing for bodybuilding shows, there's really 3 main movements that we often concentrated on. And the first was the barbell back squat. Then we had deadlifts of different kinds, dumbbells, barbell, kettlebell. And then finally, the glute hip thrust. So the glute hip thrust has become quite popular over the last several years. Again, that is one that Brett Contreras really hones in on as being important. And I agree, I really made a lot of progress since I've included more of these glute hip thrusts into my workout and training schedule. But the problem is it doesn't have the full range of motion that you would get in a squat. It's not quite the same. The squat has the fullest range of motion. And you will find many people that say barbell squats don't do any good for glutes. And then some people will say that's the only way to grow your glutes. And really neither one of them is correct in the sense that no, it's not the only way to grow your glutes. There are different things you can do and different modalities of training. And then I totally disagree with this idea that it does nothing for glutes. It is a compound exercise. So your quads, your glutes, even your calves, and of course your lower back is part of this too, even your core. It is a really big compound lift. When I say compound, I mean you're working multiple joints, multiple muscle groups. It's not an isolation. An isolation is where you're working one muscle group, such as a glute kickback is mainly going to be an isolation exercise. And then, of course, the bicep curl is one that only isolates the biceps. So those are examples of isolation exercises. You want to have these compound movements because they will do quite a bit. They do a lot for you metabolically to really give you a boost. They extend, you need a lot of energy extended in order to get through these movements. So from a perspective of expending energy and bumping up metabolism, I'm a really big believer in these movements. However, I myself can no longer take a barbell and squat. Now, I could if it was very, very light, but I've had 2 back injuries that simply will not allow it. And they're not the type of back injuries that are going to be made better by stretching or yoga. It's actual problems with the discs and some stenosis. And so I do have to be very, very careful about loading my spine because I'm asking for another injury if I load it. And I narrowly avoided surgery my last injury. So it's just something I don't do. I do Smith machine squats because I have just more control over the weight. You don't have the weight of the bar. The bars generally weigh anywhere from, depending on what type of bar, but an Olympic bar is like 40 to 45 pounds. So you already have a good load before you load it up. So yes, I could squat with one, but it would have to be such a low weight for me. So I do squat and I do various kinds. I hold dumbbells, I do goblet squats, I do kettlebell sumo squats, all different types. I do cable squats. So I do get those in there. But this is the issue with the squats is it is going to increase your chances of injury as you age. As you get older, our joints just simply don't take as much, and then back issues are far more common. In particular, degenerative disc disease is really pretty common in older people. Not everyone gets it, but it's very, very common. And you always have those exceptions. I have a friend that's in her late 60s, no back issues, and she squats a back squat, barbell back squat, quite a bit. I just can't do it. So it's about finding, it might not be the ideal exercise for your glutes, but you want to find some form. I am particularly fond of sumo squats because I can hold the weight low with either a single heavy dumbbell or kettlebell. I can get it relatively heavy. It doesn't bother my back because of where the weight's positioned and it's not resting on my shoulders or my spine. So I'm very fond of that. And it really can do quite a bit to develop the glutes. And then if you have any kind of issue with your knees buckling, for a lot of people, their knees buckle when they squat. And what you want to do is have a band, if this is you, above the knee. So one of those bands I spoke of, those loops. And this helps quite a bit because you push against the band and it can stop that caving in of the knees. So that's very important. But another thing you can do is switch to a sumo squat. And for me, that was always the better option. Even when I didn't have back problems, I had a lot of problems getting a full range of motion. My legs are very long. I just had a lot of problems getting that full range of motion with traditional barbell squats. But you do want those squats in there. And next up, the deadlifts. So here I am again. I cannot do traditional deadlifts. I cannot grab a barbell. I have tried since injuring myself to go back and do this exercise, and it's simply a no-go. So what I do is I do a variation of a sumo deadlift. I'm just very, very careful with my back on this. That is kind of a cross between a squat and a deadlift that doesn't put that pressure on my lower back. And the other thing I sometimes do is a single leg RDL, which is a single leg Romanian deadlift, where you hold a dumbbell and you are really going forward toward the ground. It's hard to explain because I can't show you. And you want to keep your pelvis positioned and so that it is not rotating. You don't want to rotate your hips every time you come up. And that's a common problem. People rotate in order to keep their balance. So what I do is I touch on a wall and I do my single leg deadlifts that way. And I'm very conscious of not having that movement through my hips or my pelvis and keeping it in parallel to the floor. So that's how I get around that. And then finally, the glute hip thrust is a favorite of mine. It is somewhat of a compound exercise because you do activate some other groups, not to the point of barbell squats or deadlifts, but you do have that multiple activation. And if you position yourself correctly off of a bench, you can get a pretty good range of motion. And for these, you can go relatively heavy. I'm able to go quite heavy without engaging my back. I find that the Smith machine has been really helpful for this. I have a lot of control over the range of motion, but I do notice that with lower back issues, I have to keep that range a little bit shorter. You want to make sure you're getting that squeeze at the top. If you have the weight too heavy, you're not going to get that squeeze. So you have these 3 bread and butter exercises. And as far as sets, you want to do anywhere from 3 to 5. I'm fond of 5, but I'm a very experienced at resistance and weight training. Been doing this many years. So I go for 5 sets to get that big volume. You could do 3 or even start with 2 and work your way up to 3. Doing anywhere from 9 to say 16 sets, 16 to 18 sets. So maybe 9 to 16 to 18 sets in a week of these 3 exercises. And it's easy to get to that. That sounds like a lot, but it's very easy. You know, you come in on a Tuesday and do all 3 of these, and you could get pretty much reach that goal very easily. Then as far as repetitions, you want to vary these up. So sometimes I do lower repetitions, sometimes I do mid-range, and sometimes I do high range. Now, because I do have back problems and the low range, I typically can't lift heavy enough to get the stimulus. I'm typically in the medium to high range when I'm training. I use the lower range as far as lower body goes when I'm doing, say, something like a leg extension that's very heavy, or a hamstring curl. And sometimes my glute hip thrust, I can do much heavier on those particular movements. But I have to watch it on leg presses and squats, and so I tend to keep that higher repetition. So you're training anywhere from 3 to 5 days. Bikini bodybuilders will often hit glutes 4, 5 times a week. Now, it's not all dedicated glute days. Those aren't all days where she goes in and does nothing but glutes. What I mean by hitting this muscle group 5 times is she's got maybe 2 to 3 dedicated days. And then on the other days, what she's doing is maybe just choosing 1 or 2 isolation exercises or band exercises to supplement what she's already doing. But she would not be doing those compound movements for 5 days, for 4 days. She would generally be doing them for 2, and then hitting the glutes with more isolation things in between those 2 training times. But for most of the listeners, you are probably going to be in the 3-day range. So maybe a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, however your schedule works out. You have your 3 compound movements. You're going to do those for 3 to 5 sets, vary your rep range, and then you're going to sprinkle in your isolation exercises. So isolation is very good for getting a connection. And honestly, when I first started to bodybuild, everything was the heavier compound lift, and I was working with a trainer, and that's how he trained me. And I developed some great quads, and I developed my outer thigh and inner thigh quite a bit, but my glutes just weren't. It wasn't like I had a flat butt or anything like that, but they just weren't growing. They just weren't developing. I just wasn't getting that muscle in there. The minute I started doing some isolation moves, it was a game changer for me. I'm like, oh, I can feel the muscles. So now when I go to do a squat or a leg press or eat one of my single leg deadlifts or a sumo, it's really easy for me to engage the glutes. I mean, I just automatically get that pump going, get that squeeze going. I can feel them. It's no problem for me to get that engaged. So isolation exercises can be extremely helpful in the beginning to help you with this. So what would the isolations be? So a hip abduction, I'm fond of doing this hovering. And if you don't know what that is, head on over to Google and look it up, hovering hip abduction. I like glute kickbacks of various kinds. I use machines. I use the bands, and I also have a cuff. I carry some cuffs for my ankle in my bag and throw those on. And I do them different ways. I do them kind of going out to the side, to get more hip abduction. I do them straight leg, I do them bent knee, I do them standing upright, I do them bent over, I do, more of a donkey kick. I do them all different ways. And then, of course, then I have the heavier machines to hit it a little bit more. So that's a great isolation exercise as well. So you kind of sprinkle in those band isolation exercises like a glute band hip thrust, a band walk, your hip abduction, your kickbacks. Those are sprinkled in your workout. What you want to be careful of is if you really have a goal to grow the glutes and really develop them, and you're concentrating on those compound movements, you can fatigue yourself doing the bands and doing some of the isolation stuff. So make sure that if you're doing it at the beginning of the workout, it's more of an activation. So you're activating the muscles, waking them up. And then maybe at the end, you could do a burnout. I'm really fond of doing a band burnout. And I've had ladies ask me, when you talk about a burnout on your podcast, what are you talking about? It's really, you're taking one exercise and you're just kind of hitting it hard, or one muscle group and hitting it hard for, like, I don't know, 5 minutes. It could be a single burnout set where you just go to complete exhaustion, where you can't go anymore. Or you're combining two exercises and going back and forth and getting as many sets and reps in as you can. With bands, I'm fond of choosing 3 exercises and rotating around 3 times, fairly high repetition. So I might be doing 30 reps of a glute kickback with a band on each leg. I might be doing 30 hip thrusts with a band, and maybe even more of the walks, because you can really get some strength and power on those. So I tend to do 40 steps, 20 each way for that, sometimes more. So it's a good burnout. But if you have it at the beginning of your workout and you overdo it, what you're going to find is that you simply don't have the strength and the power that you need to get for those more complex lifts and moves that you're doing. Now, nutrition is also a very big part of this. If you are not eating to grow this muscle group or to develop it, it's not going to happen. So if you're on an ultra low calorie diet, you're really restricting your carbs big time, it can be difficult to grow this muscle group. It tends to respond best when you are slightly in a surplus. Now, I don't mean a free for all, I don't mean a dirty bulk, I mean a slight surplus. And then when you're ready to cut and lose the body fat, you go into a cutting phase. So there are cutting phases and building phases. The cutting phase is just like it sounds. It's a shred, it's a lean down, take the body fat down, maybe some weight as well. And then the build phase is you're eating in a little bit of a surplus and you're pushing the weight more. You're using those extra calories to really grow the muscle groups. I used to have a big refeed on Saturdays. I still do sometimes. And then on Sunday, go do my leg day after I had that influx of calories. But this is where it won't work if you are not stimulating the muscle enough, if you are not doing enough volume, you're not making a connection, and you're not lifting with enough load or enough resistance. If it's bands, it can be bands, then it is going to be difficult for those extra calories to be beneficial. In other words, you really need both. You need that stimulus and you need that nutrition. So to kind of recap here, just really quickly, you have your 3 compound movements, and I talked about the 3 being the barbell back squat, the deadlift, and the glute hip thrust. But keep in mind, there are numerous ways to do all 3 of those. So if you have back issues, the safest way is going to be a single leg deadlift, and just hold lightly to something such as a squat rack or the wall, or just something to keep your balance, because if you're worrying about your balance, you're going to be more likely to have poor form. And I find that I can actually activate the glute and hamstring better when I am holding on to something, not holding on for dear life, but just kind of a light hold. Same thing with the squats. You can choose other squats. Of course, the barbell squat is considered the king, but you can develop your glutes with other types of squats. There are front squats. They work a little bit more of your quadriceps, actually quite a bit more of your quadriceps, but I found that if I elevate my heels, yes, I'm getting a good load on my quadriceps, but I can actually feel my glutes pretty good on those too. There's kettlebell squats, there's dumbbell squats, there's goblet squats where you hold a kettlebell or dumbbell up high to your chest. There's banded squats, many different kinds. Smith machine where you can control the weight a little bit better. So if you're like me and lower back issues are severe, you can choose one of those other options. And then the glute hip thrust can be done numerous ways. It can be done with a single heavy dumbbell. It can be done with a barbell. Smith machine is my favorite, and I bring a pad with me to put on the bar so that it doesn't dig into my hips. You can do them unweighted in the beginning to just get the activation going. You can do them with bands and a dumbbell, bands and a barbell. And also, leg extension machines can work really well too. Just Google that and you will see videos on that too, where women are using the leg extension machine like a glute hip thrust. People look at you funny, but I've done it, especially if I'm traveling and they just don't have enough equipment. I've done that one quite a bit. So you have your 3 movements, you modify it as needed. You do 3 to 5 sets of each exercise depending on how advanced you are. So really pay attention. Don't just jump in if you haven't worked out in a year and go, well, I used to lift heavy and do 5 sets. Really hold it back a little. And if you're a true beginner, doing these motions without weight and starting with a couple of sets or with just some bands is going to be enough for you, and then working up from there. It's always form first. You're going to sprinkle in your isolation exercises, such as the different types of glute kickbacks, many of the band exercises, and also some of the machines. The glute kickback machines are very beneficial here, both the plate loaded, and there's a couple of other machines that I see in gyms that are good for this as well. So they're a little bit more, the machines are typically a little bit more of a compound move because you do push through the quad a bit, but the majority of the work is isolated in the glutes. So here we are, 3 compounds, 3 to 5 sets, depending on fitness level, some isolation sprinkled in. You're not exhausting yourself with the isolation at the beginning of the workout. You use it as an activation. Make sure that you're able to activate your glutes because it can actually be unsafe with some squats if you're not getting that glute activation and you're taking it through your lower back. As far as sets for the whole week, 9 to 16, 9 to 18, right around in there, and really a couple of days of work or 3 days, you can get all of this in. It just depends on your schedule. And you can also hit glutes as a secondary muscle group, say on a shoulder day. I sometimes do that. Shoulders aren't as taxing, so I'll sometimes throw in some glute exercises on that particular day. Make sure your nutrition supports growth. I can't say that enough. If you're under eating, over fasting, and you're putting your body under a lot of stress, you're not going to see the growth. In fact, you may go backward and go catabolic. Catabolic means that the muscle is being broken down. You're eating up your muscle, so you definitely don't want to do that. Use a variety of rep ranges. And the way you should feel on the rep ranges is low rep is really a concentration on slowing everything down in the actual movement, and you're typically lifting heavier. So let's say you're doing 6 reps, it's heavier, you're really concentrating on the motion, maybe even 5 reps. The higher rep is really about a blood pump. It's about pushing as much blood flow into the muscles and building up endurance in the muscles. And then the mid-level range of reps, which is typically 10 to 12, that is going to use both elements. So you're concentrating on the movement, but you're also trying to get as much blood flow in as you can. You're lifting heavier than you would on a high repetition day, but not as heavy as you would with a low rep. So I really hope this is helpful. Once again, the concentration on the glutes, yes, there's the aesthetics. We want symmetry. We don't want to have big developed quads and no hamstrings and a flat butt. That's asking for an injury. And of course, that doesn't look the way we want it to look. And I believe women should feel free to still want to have that beautiful body, to still want to look their best at any age. So I would encourage you, regardless of age. But beyond the aesthetics, just looking at what it can do for your power, your movement, your locomotion, your performance. If you do any kind of sport or play any kind of game, they're going to be very active in that. If you hike, they're going to be very active in that. And power can mean standing up from a chair. So as you age, you see how older people have to hang on to things and struggle to get up. You should be able to power up and use your glutes, really using your glutes to stand up, making sure you're getting that stimulation. If you're not stimulating the muscles, I would hold off on the compound movements, the larger lifts, because they're really not going to do you much good until you get that. Remembering that it's also a stabilizer for muscles, and in particularly for the pelvis, and also very involved in the motion of the hip. These are important movements that we use on a daily basis. So regardless of age, start to think about this a little bit differently. When I get that response of, well, I don't wear a bathing suit anymore, so I don't need to worry about this. Well, I'm not trying to look like a model, so I don't need to worry about this. Just remember there are bigger reasons for this. Thank you for joining me today. Do check out my brand new book, Finding Purpose in the Pause, Your Guide to Thriving in Menopause and Beyond. It really covers 35 years on up. So it covers perimenopause and that transition through menopause and post. And I'm very thorough with the nutrition, the exercise, even some supplements that I feel can be helpful. Lifestyle habits such as stress and sleep are addressed in there as well. It is a quick read. It is not a really long one, but there's a lot of information in there. You can find it on Amazon, Finding Purpose in the Pause by Carol Covino, or you can go to the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, bye-bye.